Welcome to the 9th week of 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. Alongside me, compadre Dave Bagatelle, Chris Gray's back with you. We've got so much to talk about in what was as good as it gets a week 8, the penultimate week in the 9 weeks of NESCAC football season. But before we get there, we want to tell you about the official sponsor of 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast, Game Day Sports. You could transform your game day experience with Game Day Sports, your ultimate partner in celebrating athletic excellence. They specialize in collaborating with teams to elevate their presence and create memorable keepsakes for every fan and player. With over 25 years experience working with NESCAC teams, trust Game Day Sports to bring your team's story to life in vibrant print materials, ensuring every game day is one to remember. And Dave, boy, was Saturday one to remember. Welcome, my friend. I am so pumped to recap what happened on Saturday and preview what's going to happen on this coming Saturday.
Yeah, I don't know we could be more excited about, our awesome week 8 or what's coming up week 9 with a bunch of really amazing games, rivalry games for league championships. But last week was definitely one for the ages, Chris.
What makes this league so cool, and it's what makes the Ivy League so cool, is it also stinks that there's no playoffs and that there's no way to see how good you are compared to the rest of the country. In spite of that, what makes it so cool is the rivalries, and that all of these teams have games that will stick with them. A lot of these guys, actually 99.9% of these guys are never going to play football ever again. And for all the seniors, this is the last time they're going to put the gear on. It's the last time they're going to put your pads on. For some of us who only played in high school, you remember every snap of that last game. These guys are going to remember every moment. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. And the fact that they have big-time rivalry games as a way to culminate your football playing career before the most fun semester of your life, which is spring semester senior year, it's pretty cool. So we're looking forward to it. And we'll preview next week's games in a little bit. But first thing on the docket, Dave, what a Saturday. We had 5 games. 3 of them were awesome. And I don't really know where to start, but I think the most obvious place to start, Bowdoin and Bates, CBB game. What an interesting contrast in styles. You talk about the unique nature of the Bates flex option offense. Ryan Linsky sets a single game NESCAC record. He ran for 344 yards and 3 touchdowns. He didn't have 45 carries, folks. He had 20 carries. It's a 17.2 yard average. Now, you talk about how coaches have fared after being on the podcast. Fine. Ryan Linsky got a 9 weeks boost, 344 yards, full credit. However, it was a losing effort because Bowdoin top Bates 35-24. They started a freshman quarterback out of Northern California, Peter McCauley. His first start, doesn't get much harder than that, was on the road against Trinity. And boy, was this first-year quarterback impressive. 16 for 23, 272, 5 touchdown passes. Now, that's a stat line that will jump out at you no matter what. But you talk about a Bowdoin offense that has really struggled through the air this year. What a boost that must have been for Coach Hammer. What a great football game. As these CBB games are so much fun to watch.
Yeah, Bates, they don't keep the individual single game team rushing record in the NESCAC, but Bates almost had 400 yards of rushing in the game. They ran something like 40, 50 plays on the day. I went and looked. They averaged on the game, this is Bates, in a losing effort, almost 10 yards per play on offense. That's 9.4.
Doesn't make sense.
9.1. And Linsky has 344 yards rushing. And by the way, you talk about the coach's jinx on the podcast, but I think every single player that's been on the week after they've been on the podcast
Big games.
has gone nuts, absolutely nuts. So
We're a players show. We're players coaches.
yeah, so I think Julian Young, who we're going to have on later, look for him to have a big game this week against Bowdoin. But in any event, Macaulay, we talk about Linsky setting the record. Macaulay goes out, and those 5 touchdown passes, that tie in his second start, ties as a freshman, ties the Bowdoin single game touchdown record for a quarterback at Bowdoin. And it isn't like Bowdoin's been playing football for 10 years. They've been playing football for 140 years. Kudos to them. And despite all that, Bowdoin ends up winning that game 35-21. Hell of a game, 35-24, excuse me. Bates did make it close, and then Bowdoin pulled away a little bit for a big win, and that sets up Bowdoin, obviously, will host Colby this week for the CVB title, which we'll talk about that game later.
Yeah, just a tremendous game. And I can't remember in my years covering the NESCAC, the CBB teams being this overall competitive within the NESCAC. Now, the records don't necessarily indicate that in the big picture, but all 3 of them, Bowdoin, Colby, and Bates, all 3 of those teams very much hard done by their records going into this point in the season. You look at the results, Bates has 2 wins, ho-hum, against Middlebury and Wesleyan, who have a combined 3 losses.
Yeah.
Bowdoin and both Bowdoin and Colby easily could have won 5 or 6 more games combined this year. So it's going to be a really exciting game. We'll preview that later on in the show. We got to keep moving, though. Speaking of Colby had senior day, and we talked to Coach Cosgrove last week, and he talked about how Coach Savetti's boys have had his number, and the games have been particularly close. This game was competitive, but Mike Berluti had one of his better games of the year, and Tufts just had a little bit too much for Colby. They were able to outlast the Mules, as the Jumbo Elephant was a little bit superior to the Mule in this one, in the battle of the underrated animal mascot. Listen, Tufts, they're mathematically out of contention now for a NESCAC championship, but Tufts will play Middlebury for outright 3rd place, or actually for a tie for 2nd place in the NESCAC. And that's a big game. We'll preview that as well. But listen, Tufts has had a really nice season for Coach Savetti, and Colby, another game where they're in it and they just couldn't quite find a way to get the victory.
Yeah, Colby scored with 3 minutes left to play, made it a 7-point game. They just couldn't get the tie. Number of turnovers for Colby, that was really what killed them on the day. Kudos to Tufts, had a really strong offensive day. Obviously, they scored the 28 points, but they had 26 first downs in the game, 415 yards of offense. They've seemed to have found something in Christian Shapiro, the running back.
Oh, yeah.
So he had over 100 yards. He scored 2 touchdowns, and it helped Coach Savetti get to a real milestone. For those of you that follow NESCAC football know that he had a really tough start to his career at Tufts. I think his first 3 seasons, he was 1-23. With that win on Saturday over Colby, he finally, after all these years, got back to a 500 record as head coach. So kudos to Coach Savetti. We had Coach Savetti on earlier in the year, and great guy, and we wish him nothing but success. And I know that's an important milestone for him to start moving forward into the win column, winning side.
Yeah, so Tufts 6-2 going into that big showdown with Middlebury here in week 9. Speaking of Middlebury perhaps playing a little bit angry, a little bit disgruntled. Say what you want. Middlebury is a team that, when they haven't lost many games recently, when they have, they seem to bounce back. Last year, they lost in week 2 to Wesleyan, and then they rolled off, 7 games in a row. This year, they lose in week 1 in embarrassing fashion to Wesleyan. They roll off 5 in a row, and then they lose to Bates 2 weeks ago, and they dominated Hamilton 35-0. Hamilton's been in a lot of games. This was not one of them.
Yeah, so this is one of those, as we talked about last week, it's one of those rivalry games. It was the old rocking chair game. In my mind, a rivalry is when both teams occasionally win. That's not really the case in this situation. Middlebury has beaten Hamilton the last 28 straight times. This has been a completely one-sided matchup over the last 28 years, and this one wasn't even close. And most of these games haven't been close. Middlebury And it was Middlebury's, obviously, big shutout for them, and sets up a really interesting game for them this week, which we'll talk about later, against Tufts.
So Trinity and Amherst, Trinity traveled to Pratt Field to take on Coach Mills's Mammoths. And for the second straight week, Amherst came out and they were aggressive in the first half and they surprised their opposition. They held a lead at times in the first half. They kept this one close. It was 28-20 late in the third quarter, but as we've seen throughout Trinity, just too much firepower. The combination of O'Brien and Clapp and DiNapoli and Dabrowski. Clapp had a big game, over 102 touchdowns. And the shocking statistic here is that Xander Dabrowski threw an interception, which is just his second interception on the year. I think he's at 22 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions, which is it's a pretty good ratio.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Trinity just too much firepower for Amherst. But credit to Amherst. The last couple of weeks, after really getting dominated against Colby, Amherst has bounced back and perhaps showing some signs of some positive signs for the future, but just too much Trinity here as they get ready for their big showdown against Wesleyan.
Yes, Amherst actually closed the gap in the fourth quarter to 28-20. The NESCAC website notwithstanding posting the wrong score, which we can get into in a couple minutes. This is the killer. Look, Amherst is starting a freshman quarterback, and he looked very good against Wesleyan when we saw him live. This week, Amherst had 7 turnovers, 5 interceptions.
Can't do it.
2 fumbles. That is just not a recipe for winning football. Now, I will say on the other side, uncharacteristically, not only did Xander throw an interception for Trinity, they also fumbled the ball 3 times. So Trinity had 4 turnovers on the game as well. They were still +3. When you have 7 turnovers, you don't expect to just be +3. So this game had Trinity tried to do everything they could to keep Amherst in the game, and they ended up winning 45-20. They ended up winning pretty handily at the end of the game. This game had Amherst not blown themselves up. Could have been a lot closer. The other interesting thing is, and Trinity's had a lot of really amazing players over the years, a lot of great receivers. Sean Clapp had a hell of a day, and he actually became the career rushing leader for Trinity. Receiving.
Okay.
Reception leader, excuse me.
Yeah.
I say rushing leader. Career reception leader in that game in Trinity history, which that's saying a lot. That's pretty cool. And congratulations to him, Ramapo High School guy, Bergen County guys. We always like to see those Jersey guys doing well in the NESCAC.
We got one more game to talk about. It was our game of the week last week. It was Williams and Wesleyan. I've got my notes here. You know what I can do, Dave, with these notes? I could throw them away because it doesn't matter because I was there, baby. I was there. You were there. Where to start? I've been broadcasting sports for, let's see, I called my first game when I was 19 years old. I am now 41. I'm a young 41, but I'm 41. I've probably called, I don't know, realistically 3,000 or 4,000 sporting events. That was one of the craziest, I don't want to say the craziest, but that was one of the craziest things I've ever been a part of. For those who weren't there, Williams completed, I think, 3 passes in the football game, 2 or 3 passes, two passes in the football game.
None to a wide receiver.
Hold on, I got more here. They had a few big runs, established a run for one drive, probably during the game. In spite of all that, Eves held the lead with Wesleyan getting the football back, trailing by 6 points with 1 minute and 40 seconds left in the game, give or take. There were statistical anomalies all over the place, but the Cardinals got the football. And listen, this was a game, if you were a Wesleyan fan, which there's one person on this podcast that may or may not be a Wesleyan fan, the amount of frustrations for self-inflicted wounds from the Cardinals were innumerable. And somehow they found themselves in a situation where they just would not go quietly into the night. And this has been the storyline for Wesleyan all season long. This is a team that is 7-1 and has won, to my knowledge, one game that was not a sweat the entire year. You could put the Amherst game into that, but Amherst was winning 14-0 late in the first half, so I don't think I could even go there. But they've done all year long. They made the plays when they needed to, and Wesleyan has a guy on their team, Luke Lacercina, who is a 4-year starting outfielder on their baseball team that has been a role player for the football team. He's filled in the secondary. He's filled in on special teams, and with injuries, he's had to become a de facto slot receiver, and he caught his first ever touchdown pass as a Wesleyan Cardinal on the penultimate play of the game with 6 seconds left to win a little 3-4 for the Cardinals. Pure crazy, Dave. I don't know where you want to start on this one, but it was pure craziness.
First off, let's just start with the atmosphere.
Yeah, it was wild.
The official attendance was listed at 7,500.
That's about right, probably.
I did a physical count, actually, and I
counted. You went around and counted each individual person.
I did. I actually
officially
handed out tickets and actually collected the tickets from each and every fan. So
yeah, I believe
the official crowd size was 9,258. Just so you know.
Okay. That was the paid attendance, but I will say that there was probably 2,500 people that didn't see one play of the game because they were jamming out in the tailgate area. Literally did not even make a cameo appearance.
Absolutely.
To the venerable Andrews Field at Dillon Stadium.
But in all seriousness, it was a great atmosphere. It started out, cars lined up an hour in advance of the parking lot open. So it was, and cars actually backed all the way out to Washington Street from Willis Ave, which is pretty incredible. So it was a big crowd. It was an electric crowd, a lot of good stuff going on. And despite what Chris said, most of the fans did make it into the stadium to watch the game. And the game was a great game. I wouldn't say it was quite the contrast of styles of Bowdoin against Bates, triple option against the all gas, no break defense of Bowdoin. But it was a contrast. I think Coach Raymond made a decision that
did a really good job schematically.
Yeah, but I think he made a decision that he did not want to take the chances. The latter part of the season, the Williams quarterback, Owen McHugh, whom we've had on the podcast, who's a great student athlete, just a stellar human being. He's struggled a little bit with the interception in the last part of the season. And I think Coach Raymond didn't want to put him in that situation. Williams receivers are not what they've been in past generations of Williams teams. They made a decision that they were going to go all in on the run, despite their star senior running back, Mario Fischetti, not being available to play. So they were going with their 1B running back, also very good, John Orris. Owen McHugh, besides being a good thrower, is an excellent runner. So they went with McHugh. And by the way, they officially listed 5 passes. They probably ended up actually dropping back to pass about 12 times. There were
a lot of them turned into runs, and a lot of them turned into broken plays. But to your point, it was very evident early on that the pocket was collapsing on McHugh and that they were going to struggle creating a passing offense. But what I want to say about that, Dave, is, part of the battle is realizing that as a coach. And Williams came out in the second half and they found something. They ran outside zone plays.
Yeah.
And they also introduced, they brought their tight end / wideout Hanson in at quarterback on a couple plays. And their drive to start the second half, they were trailing by 3, got the football, and they scored, I think it was about a 50 or so yard run out of the Wildcat, untouched for a touchdown. And then Wesleyan was playing catch up, and it was one of those weird games where it felt like Wesleyan was in control, but at the same time, every time Wesleyan was about to assert themselves, something would happen and they would give Williams an opportunity. And Wesleyan made a lot of mental mistakes. They made a lot of critical errors that extended Williams' possessions. And the Cardinals found themselves really knocking on death's door in terms of a football game. And you see them all slip away. And Nico Candido led Wesleyan on just one of the more ridiculous and impressive 90-yard game-winning touchdown drives you're ever going to see that had a little bit of everything in it. And
yeah, to your point, Chris, and I think gave Williams 4 first downs on penalties, which you just can't do. So there were some critical penalties. Nico threw an interception in the end zone.
Yep.
And we dropped the punt, a muff punt, deep on our own end.
When he says we, he means Wesleyan.
Oh, excuse me. Wesleyan dropped the punt deep in their own end zone. Now, on the other side, good teams figure out a way to win it. And to the point, to prove Coach Raymond's point of not dropping back to pass, besides the 3 sacks and besides the 2 of 5 for 22 yards, one of those passes was picked off by none other than Dylan Connors, who's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in the NESCAC, and it was a pick 6 for Wesleyan at a crucial point of the game that put Wesleyan up at one point. So
yeah, Wesleyan scored 2 touchdowns prior to the game-winning touchdown, and they both came off of Williams' turnovers. They forced a fumble inside the 10-yard line on the first or second Williams possession of the game, and then obviously the pick 6. So both teams shot themselves in the foot a little bit, but it was one of those classic, to be the neutral on the podcast, Dave, it was one of those classic rivalry games where if you are the team that's in front, even if you feel as good as you could possibly feel, you always know if you're not up by more than 7 that the other team has a chance to win. And that's exactly how it played out. And there were so many little things that happened in this game that we could talk about, but this is not a Wesleyan podcast for all of you who might think it is. So we're just going to focus on the result and what it does and what it means for this season. And what it means is that Wesleyan has beaten Emerson Williams in back-to-back weeks, that Wesleyan has won the Little 3 for the 3rd time in a row, for the first time since the 1940s.
46 to 48, Chris.
Which is the 1940s. That falls in the 1940s. And
it does. I'm just giving you the exact.
Yeah, I don't know how you would know that offhand, but that's impressive.
Just a guess.
Yeah, and it also means that for just the second time in 11 years, Wesleyan and Trinity are going to, and probably the second time in 40 years, I don't know the stats, but it happened in 2013. I don't know the last time it happened prior to that. I can't imagine it's happened many times because both of these teams haven't been in the situation many times at the same time. Wesleyan and Trinity are going to be playing this Saturday at Jesse Miller Field. There's a couple other names there now too. I've got to do my research for an outright NESCAC championship, Dave. And what's exciting to me is that with all the parity we've had this year, there was a scenario going into this week that we were looking at. There could have been 4 and potentially 5 teams that could have tied for the NESCAC. And it's going to be a straight up NESCAC championship game. And there might not be playoffs in this league, but this is a playoff game. This is a NESCAC championship game for, now we talk about the Little 3 when we talk about Wesleyan, Williams, and Amherst, but Trinity and Wesleyan, that for me as a kid in Connecticut, that was the game. If you were going to go to a game, if you were going to go to a small college game, we would randomly go to the Trinity Wesleyan game with no connections to either school because it was one of those cool kind of things. They always played the last game of the year, and there were plenty of times they were 4-3 and 2-6 or whatever, and we would go to those games. And those schools are located 20 minutes away from each other. And it's about as good as it gets. And if you could have told me when we started this podcast that this is where we were going to be at, I'd say we'd have a whole bunch more sponsors because this is as good as it gets, Dave. I'm sure you're excited and we'll have time to preview it. But so we put a bow on this one. Listen, Williams is going to be a better team next year than they were this year. There's a lot of other teams in NESCAC that are going to check that box as well. Missed opportunity for Williams, not the first team that's played Wesleyan this year that probably feels that way. Coach DeCenzo's team, through hell or high water, they have figured out a way somehow to be 7-1 and a chance for Coach DeCenzo to win his first NESCAC championship and a chance for Trinity to win yet another NESCAC championship. And a lot on the line this Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it's going to be really going to be really exciting. So looking forward to, we're going to talk more about that game later, but very, very excited. And I think it's really cool that both of those two teams have put themselves in the position, despite each of them stubbing their toe during the year, obviously. Trinity lost for the second year in a row to Middlebury. Wesleyan lost a heartbreaker against Bates, and they've won some other games this year that maybe some would say they didn't have any right to win, but they did. Here we are, 2 7-1 teams for the league championship.
I know you're a man of stats, so I'm just going to give one stat before we take a break. Wesleyan Cardinals are 7-0 in games when Dave Bagatelle has not been on the broadcast.
That is correct. So it makes you wonder if I should ever be on. And by the way, I was on the broadcast in 2023, and Wesleyan almost handed Bowdoin a game after being up by 30 points?
Yeah,
whatever it was. Some crazy amount.
You got to live and learn, Dave. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah, what's going to happen when Coach Whalen retires? We'll have to have a chat about that. But anyway.
All right, that's enough for week 8. We're moving things forward to week 9, and we will preview all 5 games. We got some big rivalry games. We got the CBB on the line. We got the NESCAC on the line. We've got Tufts and Middlebury. We got so much more to talk about. We'll tell you all about it. We come back. It's 9 weeks, your unofficial NESCAC Football Podcast, and we are in week 9 right after this. Welcome back to 9 weeks, an NESCAC Football Podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome in the head football coach of the Bowdoin Polar Bears, BJ Hammer, coming off of a big victory last week in a big matchup, obviously a rivalry in Maine. When any Maine teams collide, it's important. He's preparing for another big matchup this weekend. But Coach, first of all, welcome to the podcast. We appreciate you jumping on with us. But the one thing that jumped out to me is we all know we followed you guys. We had Coy on our show in week 1. We've seen you play a lot of times. We know that the defense has showed up to play every game this year. There's been some struggles at times moving the football at the quarterback position. It seems like you really maybe found your guy for the future. Big game from the first-year quarterback last week. 5 touchdowns, took care of the football. And what seemed to be just a wild contrast of styles in Maine on Saturday night.
Yeah, I would say so. First, thanks for having me, guys. Love what you're doing. I caught a little bit of the Coy being on in the interview and a couple of the other ones and everything. And Coy's awesome, by the way. He's such a good young man and represents Bowdoin incredibly well. But no, you guys do a great job. And I played Division III football and I've been coaching at it for over 20 years. And anything like this is awesome for the sport and especially for the NESCAC. So I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
But yeah, back to what you're saying. Yeah, Peter, our young freshman, he stepped up, played big, 5 touchdown passes, and a heck of a contrast to styles, right? It's always fun preparing for like the one option team you have to play against. And I go back and talk to one of my old coaches, and you got to take away 2 of the 3 things they do. And we tried our best to take away the running back. And other than 4 runs, we did. But he's a good player, and they did a good job at that. And it's hard to move to a system like that, but Coach McAllister, Kyle McAllister, my D coordinator, and I tell you, and my D staff, we're happy we're done preparing for them to move on to a little more of a traditional system that Colby runs, like most everybody else.
So for people who don't know, obviously your background is in defense. You're a 2-time defensive D3 All-American as a pass rushing defensive end. Now I guess they'd call you an edge rusher, but back in the day, you were probably more of a hybrid defensive lineman. As a defensive guy, got to feel pretty sweet to give up 300 plus yards rushing and win a football game, right? I saw, so full disclosure, Saturday I was calling the Wesleyan Williams game, which was a crazy game. And I have a young family. I didn't get to catch the game live. And I just saw on Twitter, someone posted that Ryan Linsky had broken the NESCAC record for rushing yards. And I talked to Dave the next day and I said, Dave, wow, Bates must have had a heck of a game. And he said, no, they lost. So that must have been a fun film session while also embracing the victory.
Yeah, it's interesting. We didn't spend too much time on it after the game, to be honest with you. Just had to move to Colby because it's such a different way to change some things we do and to match them. And the last time I was in that situation, I was at Wabash as D coordinator in 2012. We were playing Carnegie Mellon, and they were old school wing T. So their staff those guys are probably 60 years old, and man, they had been running that forever. So we beat them pretty sound, but we still gave up some yards on the ground because that's the one-off thing you're seeing. But again, all credit to Ryan, the running back. He did a great job, made a couple of guys miss. We had him a few times, and he's good. And when you're concentrated on taking away the pitch and the quarterback, and you got to play super discipline, some things like that are going to happen. But I was really proud of our guys handling a few adjustments that canceled some of those things. And unfortunately got missed on that last run. We could take that one away, and that would have made a big difference. But again, I love the way our offense responded, and our special teams played well, and we played a good team football game. I think the biggest standpoint from that game was we were driving. We did not score on 4th and 1 from the 1 yard line. We immediately got a 3 and out, a big punt return, and then scored. So that really is something that we've been working for as a team, and was super proud of our guys for playing great team football, giving the ball back to the offense like that and scoring good special teams, good defense. And that's the way you got to play. Every week in the NESCAC is an interesting one. And I thought we played a good team football on Saturday, and got to do it again here in a couple of days.
Absolutely. It's interesting because you mentioned Bates, you don't have to prepare for them 1 week a year, that one option team. But I think from a defensive standpoint, you're running the option of the defense. People got to go against your high pressure, all gas, no break defense, and nobody else in the league really runs that kind of defense. I would say it's the flip side when people have to play you guys.
No, I love that too. If it makes them work, it makes them work. And we went to this back in 2011 when I first got back to Wabash, but a really good first year inside linebacker. And he was not very good. And if he hears this, he'll probably mad at me. He was not very good in coverage, but my goodness, he was the best blitzer, pass rusher. His Coy's in that area too, but this kid, Colby Rash, was unbelievable. And he broke the sack record there, had 12 plus sacks a year, like 2 or 3 time All-American. So we just used hybrid kid. And then we kept recruiting more of those type kids. Because I'll be honest, 6 foot 220, you find some really athletic kids like a Coy Price over those big D linemen that are really hard to find. And it let us do a little more with the defense. And I study a lot of NFL film, and you can see that quite a bit now in the NFL with those hybrid rush guys. So it just gives you some flexibility to do stuff. And honestly, Dave, the illusion of pressure is just as good as pressure, because this year we've had a lot of sacks just bringing 4. Now, when you have Coy Price and a couple Aiden Reedy, you can do that, right? And that helps. But the illusion of pressure is very important too, because we typically won't bring more than 5, but we are obviously going to do some things to try to manipulate the protection and stuff like that. But and the fact that we got better on the back end over the last couple of years has been big too. And we have two first year starting, Sam Schwartz at corner, and Ferris Collins, who's had a great year as a young guy at safety. It's been fun, and I think we're going to keep developing those guys really well. But again, good senior leadership on the D-line, and it's fun to coach those guys. Coy, Kanoa Young, Aiden Reedy, Mike Randall, all those. I could keep naming them. It's just fun to coach those guys who've been with you for a while.
Coach, obviously you've been at Bowdoin since 2019. As someone who's covered the league longer than that, when I first started covering the league, for the most part, all the main teams were like the doormats of this league, right? I'm not to diminish the effort that some of those guys are putting out there, but I've seen just in my years covering the league now that the parity is just exceptional. It's better than it's ever been in the 10 years I've been around. Speak to what you've seen now that you've established yourself here. There are no free games, obviously, and no one's there are no bye weeks in this league, literally and figuratively. Talk about how you've seen it as someone who has so much experience at the D3 level, but in different parts of the country, what you've seen in your time in the NESCAC and just how that gap is continuing to close. I'm sure from your perspective, you hope it continues to close even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Losing to Dave's Cardinals by 3 points in a really close game, and then losing to Tufts by 2 points. And we really let us slip away against Middlebury. We were playing lights out. And then,
we watched that game.
Yeah, credit to Middlebury. Those guys know how to win. And it's one of those things. And we were right there battling with Williams 7-7 deep into the third. And so for us, it's really learning how to win. But you said it, everyone is working hard at it. In some of the advantages in the NESCAC, you have a lot more full-time coaches. Where I was at before at Allegheny, I had myself and 3 other full-time coaches. And then I had 4 guys that were making mid-20s. They were young guys that were in their mid-20s and making that much. So with a lot of less experience. So I think having a significant bigger staff, most NESCACs tend to do that, was very helpful because you got experienced coaches and that helps you with that. But honestly, it's about working hard and recruiting. That's the number one thing we came in and did here. We had to change that model for us and find kids maybe a little more out of region, find the kids that fit our culture in region, do that. And then once you get them here, you got to develop them. I believe in player development wholeheartedly. I'm very involved in that. We have to train them year round. It can't just be a 6-month thing, lifting, conditioning, all that stuff, mobility work. The guys have really got to truly commit to that if you want to be good. And that's helped us bridge the gap. I can't speak for the other schools because I know a lot of them do some really good things just seeing their players, and you can see that. So I think that's been a big step up for us in terms of what we're doing now, and honestly, the buy-in from our players, knowing this is the commitment they got to make. And What I love about Bowdoin, though, I still had 12 guys, 13 guys going overseas this past spring. But every one of those guys, before they left, met with me and they said, here's my plan, coach, on what I'm going to do to lift, condition, why I'm in Czechoslovakia, why I'm in Spain, why I'm in Barcelona, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of commitment's awesome because those guys are your leaders. And McCoy Price is one of those guys. He was overseas, but trained every day and committed to it. And his teammates knew that. But I think great parity in the NESCAC, and we got to keep building here. My focus is on us, but I know every week's going to be a battle for sure.
Yeah, Coach, you're a unique animal in the NESCAC from the standpoint that you've been head coach at 3 different D3 schools, all in different parts of the country. Right? You were young head coach at Whittier. Of course, you were head coach at Allegheny before you come into Bowdoin, and then you were D coordinator for several years at Wabash. Had a lot of success, really good defense, made the NCAA playoffs a couple times. How does the NESCAC? Because you've got a unique perspective. Obviously, you've seen different regions, different schools. How's the NESCAC, in your mind, stack up against some of those other schools and some around the country, some of those other leagues? Just out of curiosity.
It's definitely interesting. During my time at Wabash, Eric Rayburn was the head coach there. Eric's a phenomenal coach, the head coach at Gannon now. But Eric's uncle is Larry Karras, the former head coach of Mount Union, probably the best coach I have ever been associated with in my entire life. I was around him doing USA football as a Wabash, and he actually played him in 2011 in the Elite Eight, and just tried to soak up as much as I could from Eric, because that's his mom's brother, and he played for Mount. He played for him, coached for him, and that's just seeing that helped so much with me when I took over Allegheny, and then again at Bowdoin trying to rebuild or build a program. But I would love to see the NESCAC in the playoffs. I absolutely would. I think there's been a lot more parity now. Now, I'll be honest, the Wisconsin leagues are scary. That Wisconsin league, those are some state schools. We played Whitewater in 2014, and they had the wide receiver they had was Nick and Joy Bosa's cousin, and he was all of 6'5", probably the fastest kid you've ever seen in Division III football. So that was fun. But I think there's some good teams in our conference that would do well in the playoffs, especially with the expansion. I think for sure being able to compete with some of the East Coast teams, win a game, and then back in the old format, once you get in that week 2, that's 16 teams, and they're really good. Every week 2 game we played, we beat North Central one year, we beat Thomas More in overtime. They are battles, and then you're the Elite Eight Final Four. So I definitely think some of the Trinity teams, maybe mid last year, but definitely Williams in 21, I think they would have won a game or 2. So I think it's really competitive. Where it gets hard is when you run into a Mount Union or a Wisconsin Whitewater, a Linfield, those traditional powers, because they could have 200 kids on their team. We had 180 kids on our team at Wabash in 2011. At Allegheny, when I got there, we brought in 75 kids. So having a lot more depth and the ability to bring in more kids is a big difference. And that was really where, once injuries occur, that the NESCAC could falter a little bit with some roster limits and a little more limitations there. But talent-wise, I think the NESCAC could do well when it came to, and once you get a taste of it, you know, it's every other sport. Our women's basketball team is fantastic, and they roll. So I would love to see that for the NESCAC and for football for sure.
Coach, Chris, before Chris goes to his next question, do you think that's going to happen?
I think it should. I think I just read something nice, and I'm a big proponent of it. In this day and age of Title IX and inclusion, imagine if women's soccer was the only sport that wasn't able to go. To me, it makes no sense whatsoever, and it's time to make a change. I know the Ivy League's pushing for that now.
I just saw Harvard. I just saw an article about Harvard the other day, and where the Ivy League goes, the NESCAC will follow.
Absolutely. But I think it'd be great. I think it's great, and chance to compete nationally, and every other sport is very successful. So I think football could follow, and love to see it.
So, obviously, Dave has no allegiances within the NESCAC, but if he did, he would have an allegiance to a Little 3 school. And when you have the Little 3, you have Williams and Wesleyan and Amherst, and they have their own league within a league.
Yeah.
Now in Maine, it gets lost amongst some of the other teams, but within the state of Maine, the CBB rivalry is a big deal. As you guys are prepping and getting ready to take on Colby, having already just faced Bates and having the last 2 games be CBB games, and this one coming at night, hopefully the weather will cooperate with you. Talk about, to our people who maybe aren't as familiar, just what that's like up in Maine and what that means to your program to have an opportunity going into this game to have an outright CBB championship.
Yeah, after winning it for the first time last year, winning it outright, being both Bates and Colby, you could just, our athletic director, Tim Ryan, Tim's awesome, and he's a Bowdoin alum, played football here, and you giving him that trophy and letting him give it to our seniors, that was huge, because in just seeing his excitement for getting us back to that point was awesome. And then the alums involved in that, because our guys are passionate about it. And I'm the one thing I do every year or last week of football this week is I have our seniors after every practice, a bunch will come up and say their piece, right? Say, talk a little bit, but hearing how important the football program is and how important having these rivalries are, it really makes it awesome as a coach, right? Being able to see that and seeing our guys develop and come around in a chance to play in something that really means a lot to not only them, our alums, but we're going to have a great group of students there. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll run in some extra bleachers for the end zone for where our students are, and they're going to be loud. It's going to be a fun environment. And that's what college football is all about. It really, truly is. And I played in one and coached in one of Wabash and Lone Belgian. And if you guys ever get a chance, watch that. It'll be the week after ours and been on national TV. And it's awesome. And to have that opportunity for our players, and we build that thing up, man, it's important to them. And I think that they're just excited to play. And it makes it even more special when you get a big rivalry game like that. I know the little three, they got their thing. We got our thing up here in Maine. So I think it's special. I think it's special to have that. And I love beating Colby. So I think our players love beating Colby, and that's what we want to keep doing here. Beating Bates is just as special too. So seeing that for our guys makes it awesome.
So, Coach, you've now taken over a couple turnaround situations. You know, what it takes a unique kind of person to do that and to do it multiple times. What's sort of your philosophy from a cultural standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, when you take on a situation like that and try to attack it and go about it? It seems like it's worked at Allegheny, and it seems like it's working at Bowdoin. Congratulations on that end.
Yeah, it's tough. I think I wanted that challenge again. I worked for my college coach, Greg Carlson, who was the head coach of Whittier, brought me there as a young guy. And I was really young. I had no idea what I was doing when I took over as head coach when you're in your 20s. And that was a tough place, right? Love my players that played for me there, and we did some good things. But having a chance to come back and build up a little bit of Wabash, I always wanted to do it again. And the athletic director at Allegheny at the time, Portia Foy, her husband and I were good friends. He coached with me, and I trusted Portia. I knew she wanted to get Allegheny back, and I felt the alums were hungry for it, and the president at the time as well. And just building that up and seeing our players have success in a short turnaround. Again, we were able to bring in a lot of young guys. We were able to bring in a lot of kids. And my first class, we brought in a lot of South Florida kids. One of the best receivers ever coached, Alex Victor, fastest kid you'll ever see in Division III football. And having him made it quick. And then we had some really tough kids that wanted to win. And that built it. And I'll be honest, we were driving back to Indianapolis, where I'm from, for Thanksgiving, and got an email from a search firm about Bowdoin. And I showed my wife, and my wife is from Marblehead, Mass. And her family still lives there. I love my in-laws and my family there, and a chance to get close to home. And she was like, "Oh, you're interested." And I built into that. And I knew about Bowdoin from my father-in-law's friends and in that area, but I knew it struggled in football. I followed the NESCAC as a football guy. So I knew we had a lot of work to do. And the biggest piece was adjusting to recruiting in the NESCAC. We're only bringing in 21 kids a year, 22 kids a year, but I knew player development would be the key. And we had to hit on those guys. We had to develop them. And I think it's so important at our level to really, especially at a Bowdoin, maybe a Williams Amherst, where you don't have as much flexibility. You got to find the right young men that believe in what we're doing, that are willing to do that. And credit to the Andrew Bulls, Max Jacobs, all those guys. And the guys that I inherited, Drew Ortiz, John Page, and Drew was a huge part of that. And those guys, because they bought in and they wanted to be a part of it. And then Brendan King, all those guys, and they put the work in. And it could have been easy to be like, this guy's nuts. He's making us do this stuff to get better. But they wanted that. They built Bowdoin, and seeing those guys and how much pride they got in the program is awesome. And that shows we're doing it the right way. But love our players and what they're doing. You just got to build it the right way, and wins will come. It's culture competitive in the NESCAC, and we're 5 points away from 2 more wins, but we got to get this one and just keep building. But it's tough. My wife probably looked at me like, you're a crazy person doing this 2 times in a row after just building one. But I like that challenge, and I felt Bowdoin was hungry for change and wanted it, and that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah, and just real kudos to you, because not only these great athletes, but I've had an opportunity to get to know Drew Ortiz a little bit beyond football, and Max Jacobs also did some mentoring with him. And the student athletes you're getting are just top-notch character kids. Congratulations on that, Coach. Great,
no,
great job. Yeah.
Great no, thank you. That means a lot. Those guys are awesome young men. And I was texting with Max and Andrew this morning.
Tell Max and Drew hello from me. Yeah.
I got one last thing for you, Coach, and I'm going to let you go. Obviously, you have a lot on your plate preparing for Colby this week. They're a great football team. As someone who has faced both Trinity and Wesleyan, that's our game of the week this week. I'm not asking you to pick a winner, but I would love, just from a coach's perspective, to help us preview this game. What do you think is going to be the biggest factor? You were in games with both of these teams. Both games were competitive. What do you think is going to be the biggest factor to determine who the NESCAC champion is this year?
You got two of the best skill players in the conference, probably the two best receivers. And not to take away from the Clapp kid, who's really good, but the O'Brien kid, number 11 from Trinity. Oh my goodness, he is really good. He put about 5 of my guys in a blender on a punt return. They broke that game when we were a little neck tight with them. So he is really good. So what that Wesley is going to have to put a cap on him and stop him, because he's a really good player. Obviously, Chase Wilson's a stud. We did everything we could to try to take him out of that game, and he still made a great slant catch there to ice the game against us. So those things will be a factor there. Trinity, if they can bring Candido to the ground and not let him scramble, because he is a nightmare. We had a great pressure dialed up. It was completely untouched at the quarterback. AAA got pressure, and I have no idea how he escaped that. And so credit to that kid. But Trinity's tough. They're always good in every phase. They have good players. So Wesleyan's going to have their hands full, but if they can find a way to get to Chase, that can help them. But man, Wesleyan has a little bit of a magic touch with some things.
It certainly appears to be that way.
It is incredible.
Something else.
But those two guys are the key to the game, in my opinion, and you got to eliminate big plays. So the teams that have kept Trinity close have eliminated those big explosive plays. They're going to get their chunks. But if you can eliminate the big explosive ones and make them work the field, that will really be a benefit to you. But I think it's going to be a good game. I think Trinity's a really tough team. But again, Chase Wilson can get an 80-yard touchdown like that. And so Trinity's got to stop him and get Candido in the ground. Those would be keys right there. Yep.
Coach, we certainly appreciate you being so generous with your time. We wish you the best of luck here this weekend. Was it a 5:30 start time? Is that what it's 5 o'clock start time?
5 p.m. Yeah, we got
All
senior day. So senior day at 4:45. This is going through that with our sports information director. Yep, should be following up here in Maine, guys. Yep.
CBB on the line. CBB on the line. We'll be tuning in for sure. Listen, that's enough of your time. We'll let you get back to your prep work and dealing with your 185-pound middle linebacker as a 9-year-old that you got roaming the streets back there behind.
Exactly.
But, that is the head football coach of the Bowdoin Polar Bears, BJ Hammer, back with more 9 weeks in NESCAC right after this.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Coach.
Yep.
Thanks, Coach. Good luck. Welcome back to 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Game Day Sports. You can transform your game day experience with Game Day Sports. They're your ultimate partner in celebrating athletic excellence, specializing in collaborating with teams to elevate their presence and create memorable keepsakes for every fan and player. They've got over 25 years of experience working with NESCAC teams, so trust Game Day Sports to bring your team's story to life in vibrant print materials, ensuring everyone game day is one to remember with Game Day Sports. Big game day coming up for our next guest, Colby Mule linebacker Julian Young, getting ready for the CBB finale under the floodlights, taking on Bowdoin with everything on the line. Julian, welcome to the podcast. We're pumped to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
So, Julian, first question is, obviously you guys are coming off of a really competitive game against Tufts. You guys, it feels like your whole season has been, every single game has been a one-score game. Every single game has been, you've gotten a couple of them, you've lost a couple of them, some in agonizing fashion, but you guys have clearly built your program up to a point where you are in every single football game. Get rid of the previous 8 weeks. Talk about what this particular week means to your team, the CVB, the opportunity to hoist that trophy, what that would mean for you and what that would mean for your program.
Yeah, this week is definitely a very important week for us. Coming off from the loss last week, we emphasized, it was also our senior day, so we emphasized playing for the seniors. And I think a lot of the younger guys really took that to heart. And it was upsetting that we couldn't capitalize on last week. But coming up on this week, a huge week, final game for the seniors, final game for us to play together as a family, as we say. And it's also a huge week for our new defensive coordinator this year. Coach Hyman's was at Bowdoin last year. We're just looking to bounce back from our loss last year against Bowdoin, where they won the CDB. So we're looking to come in and take it. So it's extremely important.
Yes. So Julian, it's great having you. Obviously, you've had an amazing career at Colby. You're a 2-time first teamer in the NESCAC. Looks to me like you're having a third first team NESCAC kind of season. You're up there in tackles, sacks, tackles for losses, pretty much every defensive category. Julian Young's name. We've been watching you play for a long time. You've been playing since your freshman year. I know we have a friend in common, Coach Chacon, who's down. Coach Sheeks is now the defensive coordinator down at Wesleyan. He stole one of your buddies from the Colby defense, Nick Donadio.
Yeah.
Do you stay in touch with Sheeks, and what's your relationship with him? And I think you had mentioned to me when we were arranging this that he was the reason you ended up at Colby and heard about Colby. Talk a little bit about that relationship and how that all went down.
Yeah, me and Coach Sheik have a great relationship. We always wish each other happy birthdays and holidays. And even after the Wesleyan game this year, I was able to see his son. I have a little brother of mine who's only 5 years old. Sheik also has a son that's around the same age. So it was cool being able to see both of them grow up as I was coming out of high school and as he was recruiting me. But in high school, I actually played for Coach Sheik's godfather, was my head coach. So through that connect, I never knew anything about any NESCAC schools, or I've heard of Amherst for some odd reason, but I never really paid attention to anything in the NESCAC. I just wasn't sure. And one day my head coach came to me and was like, hey, I really think you should look at this school, Colby, like a great school, great academics, like competitive D3 league. And I feel like if I made that connect there with you and Coach Sheeks, like you guys could form a relationship. And me and Coach Sheeks ended up talking, and he's a great guy. I have nothing bad to say about him. He's always, even from the jump, gave me an opportunity to play as a freshman, which not many people get to do. So I was truly grateful for that. And still to this day, like he is the reason I'm here at Colby. Like he recruited me here, and I didn't get that many looks coming out of high school from any other NESCACs besides, I think, Hamilton. She just was one of those recruiters that really showed me love from the jump, like genuine love. And I'm really grateful for him.
As someone who's broadcast a few of your games, one thing that jumps out to me is that you play with like your hair is on fire, and you still got a good head of hair. So embrace it while you got it, brother, because those things don't last forever. Okay, so trust me. But
hey, I resemble that remark.
Hey, nobody knows, Dave. No one sees underneath the cap. All right,
that's why I have the hat on.
That's our little secret. Okay, Dave's got actually really long, flowing. Yeah, but you play with like kind of a joy and a reckless abandon, but obviously at your own speed and under control. Talk about what you're thinking about when you're looking at the other team and you're about to get loose. Like, what's going on through your head? What is your process? As a defense in general, you guys play really fast, and I was super impressed when I saw you guys this year at Wesleyan. Talk about your process as a linebacker and just what's going on through your brain back there.
Yeah. I would say even like a young age or like throughout high school, my coaches and my parents have instilled like a fearlessness and a drive to just do better each and every day. So I feel like each play or each game that I've been playing in my college career, I've just been building and working off of that. And also just I'm able to play as fast as I'm able to play and as comfortable as I'm able to play, even though it's defense, it shouldn't be comfortable. I feel extremely comfortable out there because of the guys that I have around me and the coaches I've had. A big shout out to the D-line and the DBs, because I really can't do much without them. The D-line keep me cool, keep the holes looking nice for me to run through. DBs make sure the ball doesn't get thrown over my head, and I'm able to just fly around and make plays. And I really trust everybody. I look at everybody on the team as family. So I know we're all willing to sacrifice for each other, and I'm really like extremely grateful for them. Even since freshman year, just the kids that we've had on the team, I've just really embraced them, and I'm really thankful for them because I really couldn't do half of the stuff that I've been doing without those players that have been there with me.
It's been a really crazy season for Colby. You guys are sitting here 3-5. I've seen you play a couple times, seen you play live, and I've watched a couple other games. You know, you could very easily be sitting here right now being 8-0, being in the mix. All 5 of your losses are really close. You were ahead a lot in a lot of those games. One game was obviously the overtime game down at West against Coach Sheeks. It's been a really interesting season. Just curious. Of course, you have one more game, and this is a big make it or break it CBV game, all that kind of stuff. Still end up with the four wins. But talk a little bit about the season, kind of looking back a little bit now through 8 weeks.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, looking back, I just feel we left a lot of stuff on the table as a team, and our losses and I don't want to say our downfall, but like our losses and the lessons that we learned from them are strictly based off of like self-inflicted wounds. We always say. I feel like it just comes down to discipline, and we've been stressing that. Our coaches have been stressing that the whole year. Just discipline, making sure everybody does their job, every play of the game, and make sure we stay within our ball. And that's what's kept us in games, but that's also what has ultimately made us lose games is not being disciplined. And when you're playing however many snaps a game or however many snaps you get a game, whether it's 10 snaps, whether it's 90 snaps, each snap you have to be willing to stay disciplined, stick to your job, and trust the dude next to you and make sure that everybody's doing their job. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to have success. And that's where we've had some problems, some struggles, whether it's penalties, whether it's missed assignments, whether it's everybody's doing their job and one person messes up on one thing. And sadly, we learned from those lessons, and we're hoping to go into this next Bowdoin week and make sure everything's glued together and bring together a total game for a win for our seniors on their last game and to win the CBB.
Yeah, obviously it's like such a challenge, right? You want to be aggressive, and what makes you guys, in my opinion, having seen you guys such an impressive unit, is the aggressiveness. But with that aggressiveness, you have to find that balance, right?
Exactly.
And I know the one game I called, the Wesleyan game, there was quite a few late hits / personal fouls, both on special teams and on the defensive side of the ball. And that extends drives, and that can kill you too. So you have to find that balance, and it's fine margins, right? Especially now, the NESCAC has never been as balanced. We talk about it all the time. It's never been as balanced as it's been. You guys have played 8 games, and how many of those 8 games have been one-score games, right?
Yeah.
I don't know offhand. I think all of them. Have you guys had one game that has not been a one-score game this year? Maybe Trinity was 10 points.
Well, the one game they rolled up on Amherst, which was basically their best game of the year.
Excuse me, excluding the Amherst game.
Yeah.
Excluding the Amherst game and the Trinity game, which was a 10-point game. Every other game was a one-score game.
Correct.
Yeah.
So 6 out of the 8 games. That's fine margins, man. And that's sports, right? And so you have one more week and leave it out there, and we're excited. We're very excited to see what happens. We got one last thing we want to do for you. Dave does this. It's 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. Dave's going to ask you 9 questions. We want to know more about you. Dave, the microphone is yours.
All right. Our final 9 questions, 9 weeks player quiz. It's not a quiz, but pretty low case.
It's 100.
Everybody gets on.
Easiest class you've ever taken.
Absolutely. Yep. So, Julian, what's your major at Colby?
I'm a global studies major with a minor in economics.
Wow. And what's your favorite class?
Oh, my favorite class. I took a Latin American history class my sophomore year, which is really nice. But the class I'm taking now is humanitarianism, which is my senior seminar, which I'm really enjoying.
Cool. It's great. So if you didn't, we were talking a little bit earlier about your choice to go to Colby. If you didn't end up at Colby, where do you think you would have ended up?
Oh, I had some PWOs because I was around COVID times. Like all the camps got canceled, and they were recruiting based off of height, weight, and chum and whatnot, and not so much camps anymore. So I feel like I would have ended up somewhere closer to home. Maybe, I don't know, maybe somewhere in the Ivies or maybe Holy Cross or school like that. FCS.
Cool. And what's next for Julian
after football? After this season, I'm gonna hope to continue to work out. Me and Josh and stuff here. We want to really see if we can continue life after football, see where that takes us. But I want to be able to work, like be able to get a job with my major and be able to make money and use these different relationships that I've gained, not only just from Colby, but to other students on NESCAC teams, which I feel like are extremely good relationships, because rather than just having and knowing people here on campus, like I know people from a bunch of different schools, and I just feel like being able to find a job using those connections would be great.
Yeah, and that is the one good thing about the NESCAC. During the season, we all have these rivalries and we want to beat up on each other. But when the season's all done, we're all in for the NESCAC. So whatever NESCAC alums can do to help other NESCAC alums, we're all here for each other. So you're right on with that. Julian, who's your role model?
My role model, that's hard. As far as playing on the football field, I would say Ray Lewis. But as far as in life, I would say my mother, my father. I can't really choose one because they both have great attributes that I try to mend and live my life to them. So, I mean, not live my life to them, but model my life after them because they've been able to provide so much for me and give me so many opportunities that I'm so thankful for. And my parents had me at a young age, and I know that's hard, and I know that was hard for them. Being able to, a lot of people say I'm a good young man. So I give them a pat on the back every day, and I love them for being able to mold me to the person I am today.
Awesome. We know you're from New Jersey. We already know the answer to this question. What's your favorite football team? And the answer is going to surprise some people, we think.
Yeah. I'm a Baltimore Raven fan. Even though I'm from Jersey, people think Giants, Jets. They say they're the New York Giants and the New York Jets, but their stadium's really in New Jersey. But no, a bunch of my family members are Giants. My dad's surprisingly a Bears fan, but I'm a Ravens fan.
Sounds like you and your dad are both very smart, not getting sucked into the whole. Listen, Chris is a Jets fan. We can feel really sorry for him. But anyway, Julian, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food? I'd say probably a good steak. I can't go wrong with a good steak.
Sounds good. And so we don't want any game planning info, but what should we look for this week up at Bowdoin or down at Bowdoin?
Should expect an aggressive defense, aggressive but smart defense, and an offense that is going to put all those games that we had in the beginning of the season and last week, put it all together and be able to have a complete game. So it's going to be a complete football team, complementary football, offense and defense, and be able to put it together.
Awesome. And last question, what does Julian like to do in his free time?
On my free time, sometimes I'll play video games. Sometimes, not sometimes, but most of the time I work out or hang out with my friends. And I call my brother here and there on FaceTime and on his little iPad because he's 5 years old. That's my little best friend. Yeah. But yeah, I just like relaxing because, life is too short to be running around all the time. So you just got to sit and be in the moment.
Yeah, when we get to middle school, your brother gets to middle school, make sure to get in touch with us so we can start recruiting him.
I will. Yes. I'm definitely, once you're a little bit older, I'm definitely going to be at the field with him. I'm going to be in the gym with him. Don't worry. I'm gonna definitely turn him into a little weapon.
Excellent.
Excellent. I love it. Julian, you're the best, man. That's so refreshing. I love it. Listen, we appreciate your time. We know that life is busy as both a student and an athlete. So we're going to let you get back to your life over there. Get ready for a big game on Saturday night under the floodlights.
Yes,
5 p.m. start time. Last time stepping foot on the field. Big time moment. Everything to play for. We wish you the best of luck. So good luck this Saturday. Good luck with the next steps in your career. We'll be following along. We certainly appreciate you taking some time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you, gentlemen. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day, good rest of the week.
All right.
Absolutely. We appreciate you, Julian.
That is Julian Young, linebacker for Colby College Mules. Big game, CBB on the line Saturday night. We'll preview that one and more when we come back. 9 Weeks in NESCAC, an unofficial NESCAC Football Podcast. Welcome back to 9 Weeks, your unofficial NESCAC Football Podcast. Dave, we have gotten to that time. It is 9 out of 9, my friend. Although I'm sad because it's coming to an end, I am excited to be on this journey with you. We got rivalry games. We've got titles on the line. We've got all sorts of storylines. To think that there would be a time that Emerson Williams would be an afterthought in a preview in the final weeks, in the final week of the NESCAC football season tells you just where we're at. I'm going to do something I don't normally do as the host. I'm going to defer to you. What game do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about the Little 3 consolation game in Williamstown first.
All right, so we've got Amherst, who started the year 2-0, and they have struggled ever since against the Williams team, who's, I think they're on the come, but they haven't been able to. Really, both of these teams have struggled against the top teams in the league. Williams obviously has been more competitive. They lost tight games to Middlebury, to Tufts, to Wesleyan, and they led Trinity 14-0. However, all four of those games ended in a loss for the East. Amherst has beaten the two teams with the worst record in the league. But as in these rivalry games, I would be stunned. Dave, I'm telling you right now, Dave, this is going to be a one-possession game. I would be stunned if it's not a one-possession game. Amherst seemingly is figuring things out. In spite of all those turnovers, they were in the game against Trinity. And Williams, as we saw last week, without Fischetti, they just don't have a ton of firepower on offense. I think this is finally poised for a rivalry game.
So I agree with you. It is a rivalry game, and I agree with you that it's going to be probably closer than it should be or ordinarily would be. I just think Williams playing at home, a win for Williams gives them a winning record. It'd be their first winning record since 2021. So the game means a lot to Williams. The game also means a lot to Amherst. They haven't won since week 2. As you said, they're starting a freshman quarterback at this point. He had a good game against Wesleyan, I would argue. He had a not so great game against the Trinity Bantams. I think Williams will probably throw the ball more than 5 times against Amherst, just a guess, maybe. Throw everything out the window. These guys will throw the kitchen sink at each other to get a win. I think Williams playing at home, it'll be a good, decent size homecoming crowd. So I think it's going to be a somewhat close game. I don't think it's going to be, like you said, Chris, a 1-score game. I think Williams wins by 10, something like 24-14, something in that ballpark. But I am going to go with the Eafs in the Little 3 second place game.
So you talk about Amherst starting a young quarterback, and he did some nice things against Trinity. And you can talk about the 4 interceptions, which obviously no football coach, no football team is going to want to live with 4 interceptions from their quarterback. But he was 26 for 41 for 270 yards against a very good Trinity defense. It's a Trinity defense that is either first or second in the NESCAC defensively, depending on the metrics that you look at. And so if they can clean up the turnovers, that comes with experience. I still feel like this is one of those games that, you have to pick a winner, but I would be shocked if Coach Mills doesn't pull out all the stops and try to salvage their season here. And what in many years of your lifetime and my lifetime was the game in the NESCAC. So to see this being a game for just one of these teams trying to have an above 500 record is really astounding. But that kind of speaks to the parity of the NESCAC, if nothing else, this season.
One of the problems, just one last comment on this. One of the problems with Amherst all year is they don't really have playmakers on offense.
They can't run the football.
And they don't have anybody really in the top 20 in either receiving or rushing. So
not a good formula.
They have a really good guy in the secondary, Luke Harmon. If I was Coach Mills, I'd think about throwing him on offense, throw him some passes. He's a really good athlete. He's going to be a first-team All-NESCAC guy. As you said, throw everything at Williams. Give him a shot. But what do they have to lose? Who knows? We'll see what happens.
All right, Dave, dealer's choice. What do you got for game number 2?
Let's go to the Bates Bobcats, the Frisky Kitties, traveling to Hamilton in a game that will probably have a lot of friends and family at that game.
Listen, this is a big game for both teams. For Bates, for Coach Coyne, who's continuing. We've talked about this ad nauseum. He's building a program, and they've seen steps. They've got 2 gigantic wins this year against 2 teams that are going to finish in the top 3 in the NESCAC. They've lost some close games. They've shown some signs. From the Hamilton perspective, this is a Hamilton team that's been in a lot of games, excluding last week. They've been pretty competitive in pretty much every game they've played this year. This is a real opportunity for them. Obviously, no team wants to take the field in their last game of the year with the possibility of having a winless season. However, with that in mind, they can really change the entire narrative if they can find a way to win this game. So although on paper it doesn't seem like the game with the most intrigue, I still think there's a lot on the line in this football game.
Yeah, so Bates had one of those years last year where they didn't win a game. So they've been where Hamilton is this year. Hamilton's never gone 0-9 for what
Really?
that's worth. Bates, they've had winless years, but those were 0-8 winless years, not 0-9 winless
Okay.
years.
Caveat. How many years have they been playing 9 weeks in the NESCAC, Dave?
Yeah, since 17. So it
Okay.
hasn't been that many years. With that being said, if this was being played in Lewiston, I think Bates would probably be a double-digit favorite. I think this is going to be a very close game, but Bates' offense has found it. This is going to come down to, in my mind, if Basile can just avoid the turnover. The games,
The games he's taking care of the football, they've won. And
yeah, I think that's the key of the day. Linsky's going to get his 100, 200 yards rushing. He's going to have a big day. They're going to run the ball. They're going to be efficient on third down. Hamilton has had some issues at quarterback. They had the rookie of the year from the NESCAC came back as their starter this year. He struggled. They went to their second string quarterback. I don't know if the Curzum is hurt. I just think that Bates is a program on the rise. They've got 2 wins, and I think they win this game by 3 or 4 points, 28-24, 27-24, something like that.
all right, so I'm going to take back the remote control here. And I think there's 2 places we can go here, but I think out of respect for the standings in the NESCAC, we need to go to the CBB game, the CBB championship game, Colby and Bowdoin. By the way, it feels like these main teams are playing night games every single week, Dave, which in a normal weather year would be bonkers. But because it's 75 degrees in New England on November 6th, maybe they knew what they were walking into. But it seems like every single week we're previewing the game in Maine that's under the floodlights.
So all of the CBB games, I believe, are night games. And Chris, when you spend $2 or $3 million to put lights on your field, you got to amortize that cost. So let's go. Play it.
I don't think there's a player or a fan anywhere that would object to that. Listen, we talked to Coach Hammer and obviously we talked to Julian just moments ago, and you could see what's so intriguing about this matchup is both of these teams have been building and they've had positive results, but their seasons could be much different. We watched Bowdoin play Middlebury in week 2, and that game was there for the taking for Bowdoin. And how different would their season look if they could have turned those field goals from the 2-yard line into touchdowns in the first half? How different would Colby's season look? We don't even know where to start here. They had so many opportunities, but they just haven't been able to find that special sauce when it matters most. But with all that said, these are 2 really good football teams, in spite of the fact they both have 3 wins coming into this game. And if the scary part is, I think, as I put on your prognosticator hat going into next year, what I really want to see is how the freshman signal caller for Bowdoin performs this week. If McCauley can put together another great performance like we saw last week, 5 touchdowns against Bates, then you're thinking you're always going to trust Coach Hammer in the way that they play defense. They're going to be in the games. If he's got a guy who's going to be there for the next 3 years, we might have something. So I think that's the number one narrative. And then the second thing I'm looking at is Coach Cosgrove's Colby team has a ton of experience. And these are guys that were unable to win the CBB last year as they fell to Bowdoin. And this can change the narrative for their whole season, right? Coach Cosgrove talked about the importance of being above 500, but I think just as important would be winning their 4th game and winning the CBB. I think in many ways that means just as much. So a lot on the line in this one.
So both teams are coming in 3-5. 4-5 looks a hell of a lot better than 3-6. So really, and they're playing for the CBB title. I think this is a game that if it's being played at Bowdoin, being played at Colby, I'd probably make Colby a 3-point favorite. But since it's being played at Bowdoin, I'd probably make Bowdoin a 3-point favorite. With that being said, and as we discussed with Julian, right now Colby could very easily be in the mix for, I don't know, I'm going to stretch and say they'd be challenging.
I think 6-3 is a realistic number for them.
Yeah, they could have been sitting here right now where Middlebury and Tufts are very easily 6-2 or certainly 5-3.
Yeah.
They haven't had a winning season since 2005, and that would have totally changed the narrative. From their standpoint, disappointing year, but this is a good way to salvage something. I think you're playing a freshman quarterback against an experienced coach like Coach Cosgrove. Obviously, he's had not only success in the NESCAC, but obviously had a lot of success at the FCS level. So I'm gonna, and Colby's got a little bit more experience, a little bit more senior laden. I'm going to take Colby here in a slight upset on the road at Bowdoin. I think they win it 24-21. Could even be an overtime game.
Very bold strategy there by the man who knows more about the NESCAC than just about anyone else, but I will defer to his opinions on this. I have long learned that nothing comes from me making picks on this show. It's nothing positive. So we're now down to what is the de facto second/third place game in the NESCAC, which is 2 6-2 teams that will be doing battle, Middlebury and Tufts. And these are two teams, I think realistically, if you were to be fair, if you were to throw Tufts, Middlebury, Wesleyan, and perhaps Trinity in the same hat, and they all played each other, all the games are going to be competitive, which they have been. All the games are going to be fairly even, and it just so happens that the way it's, played out, that these two teams are mathematically out of a chance for a NESCAC championship. With that being said, a lot of talent on both these teams, and I think this is a season-defining game for both teams. You talked about Coach Savetti getting his record back to 500 lifetime, which is great, but I think for Tufts, a team that has had flash talent and have had big wins through the years, but have struggled to put together 9 weeks of good football, I think a 7-2 season for Tufts would mean even more than it would for a Middlebury team that has won NESCAC championships in 2 of the last 4 years.
I agree with you. I think,
and for Michael Berluti, this is obviously a season-defining game.
Yeah, this is, look, end of a great career. Kudos, end of a great career for a lot of players in this game.
There's a lot of seniors out there, yeah.
Michael Berluti, all-time great career. Obviously, this hasn't been one of his more defining statistic year, but although I think he's leading the NESCAC in total offense, but he hasn't thrown the touchdown passes or run for touchdowns he normally does. And that's just partially because he doesn't have
the weapons,
the cast of characters around him that he's had in the past. But still a great year, and he's a very experienced player and he's an all-time great NESCAC player. But of course, on the other side of the ball, you've got guys like Tomas Kettery and
Benny
Stolen. You got Perry, who's had a great career in the offensive
Patrick
line.
Jamin.
Yeah, there's a lot of great players in this game. I think it's going to be a very close game. They're playing this at Tufts, not under the lights, I might add. I think this is another one that's going to be a field goal game, and I just feel like Tufts right now is playing a little bit better. I think they've established a pretty good run game with Shapiro running the ball, and their defense has been they don't have any other than Jaden Richardson's brother, who's up there in the NESCAC. I think he's leading the NESCAC interceptions. They don't really have anybody with any eye-popping statistics like they've had in the past, but they're just workmanlike, getting the job done. I'm going to go with the home team, and I think Tufts gets it done, and they win 24-21.
Yeah, listen, I think the most dangerous thing you can do on a NESCAC prediction podcast is to bet against Middlebury as an underdog, because say what you want, the games Middlebury has lost over the last few years have been as favorites. They typically, when they have something to play for, they come out as a different team. But I certainly think if you're telling me that this is the third or second or third most intriguing game of the week, we've got a heck of a week in front of us, because this is going to be a good game in Medford.
And I think
it's too bad. It's actually too bad that it's in week 9, right? Because as a standalone, if this was week 7, this would have been the game of the week, right? But it just happens to be going up against a couple other games that have a little bit more juice, perhaps, in terms of just straight up rivalry significance.
Yeah, what's interesting about this, Chris, I think if you, and I think we did talk about it at one point 4 or 5 weeks ago, I thought this game would have been uber important in terms of determining who the NESCAC champion is going to be. Yeah. But here we are. It's not. It's a consolation.
We were just one NESCAC scoreboard error away from it being a title decider. But that's the way the cookie crumbles with technology and inputting scores into a software platform. So we digress. All right, last game of the week is probably one that professionally care about as a podcaster, but probably not as much emotionally in terms of having affiliation or an attachment to this game. But 12 o'clock start time, we've moved the clocks forward, or backwards, excuse me. Wesleyan travels to Hartford, just off of Broad Street, to take on the Trinity Bantams, Vegas gold and navy blue against black and red on a Saturday afternoon in front of thousands of fans with an NESCAC championship on the line. And Wesleyan has struggled tremendously over the last, let's say, decade in this rivalry. But the one victory they do have was in 2019 when Wesleyan was 8-1 and they went into Hartford and they beat Trinity. For them to recreate that experience, a lot of things are going to have to go right. But for whatever reason, just seems this is one of those weird years where Wesleyan is dipped in fairy dust, Dave. But I have to be cautious with those words because I can't unsee the Trinity Wesleyan game from last year, which was as one-sided of a game between two good teams as I've ever seen in my broadcasting career. Trinity could have won that game by 85 points last year, if I'm being frank. I mean, that was a domination, and that was and Wesleyan very rarely loses at home. They never get blown out at home, and they were dismantled in that football game. So how can they close the gap? Because a lot of those guys are still lining up for Trinity.
Actually, what a lot of those guys are, there are a lot of guys gone. We can start with the quarterback. Now, look, Xander's had a great year, but
hasn't been much of a drop off there. He's more efficient with less mistakes statistically.
But they had all seniors and fifth years on defense, and those guys are all gone. Look, a lot of you, I'm sure, watched the election yesterday, and we're not going to get political here.
We will not.
But I am going to make a comment that is what we heard a lot last night. Although certainly Trinity comes in for a whole lot of reasons being the favorite, and not the least of which is they don't lose many of these games in the coop. I will add that in 1985, I was part of a Wesleyan team that won in a romp over Trinity on that very field.
Hold on. You went to Wesleyan?
I didn't say I was playing for Wesleyan. I just said I was playing in a game on that field.
You said you were part of the Wesleyan team.
Oh, okay. All right. Then I stand corrected. But yeah, we beat Trinity when I was playing for Wesleyan that day, 42-20, just for the record. That was in 1985. So
it is my last 30-second time out here. This is the one time you're allowed to wee as much as you want, Dave. This is a rivalry game. Go ahead, wee your heart out.
All right. But anyway, so where I was headed with this is, look, Trinity is going to be favored in this game. There's no question, no doubt about it. They're playing at home. They've had Wesleyan's number. Wesleyan has been the cardiac cards. They've won a lot. They've snatched a
victory from defeat.
Yeah, a number of times this year. But, and here's my political analogy, there is a pathway for a Wesleyan victory here, and I will explain how that pathway happens. First of all, I think if Wesleyan can play close, get into the fourth quarter and it being a close game, we've seen Trinity have some problems this year in the fourth quarter. Wesleyan, when they have protected the ball and when they've shown balance on offense, and in their defense, they run the ball better the last couple of weeks. And the two guys that are playing now, McHugh and Diaz, don't get a lot of negative yardage plays. So they keep the ball moving forward. So I think if they can protect a Nico Candido, if the offense can limit the turnovers, and they can show balance running and passing the ball. And look, the one thing that Wesleyan has is they do have an excellent defense. It is a top-notch defense. It's the number one ranked defense in many
number one
categories.
Against the pass, number 3 against the rush, and right there
number one in
overall, yeah.
Number one in points, number one
Yep.
in third down
Yep.
percentage. I can go on and on. The number one in fewest touchdowns allowed. They've done the number one in the red zone.
Mhm.
So the defense is all seniors and fifth years for the most part. They sprinkle in some underclassmen here and there.
Yep.
They've got a couple of the best players in NESCAC at their positions, whether that's Ben Carbo is right there with everybody.
Yep.
They've got Dylan Connors in the
Yep.
secondary. I think that they've got a puncher's chance. Now, with that being said, they're going to have to force Zabrowski to turn the ball over. He only has, 2 picks this year, 3 picks this year?
No, 20, yeah, two interceptions. One of them was last week, yeah.
So they're going to have to force some turnovers. They've got to keep O'Brien and Clapp in front of them. They did not do that last year in that game, and they're going to have to do that. DiNapoli is a really good running back. They lost their second guy to injury, so they're primarily going with him, he's not a slouch, and he can definitely handle
Not
the
a
workload.
problem for them, yeah.
So all things being equal, I think it's a tough road to hoe. I would say Trinity is probably somewhere in the 14 to 17-point favorite being objective, but I think there is a path. Wesleyan's got to come out and play pretty much the way they played against Middlebury. They're going to have to play that kind of game. They're going to have to play their best game since week 1. They played very well against Tufts also, especially defensively. They're going to have to play that level game to have a shot against Trinity, and they're going to need some breaks. Of course, because I'm not going to pick against my alma mater. I just have I don't know what it is, Chris. As you said, there's just pixie dust this year. Some years I don't feel like it's Wesleyan's year. Everything seems to go against them. Calls, turnovers, ball bounces the wrong way. This year, all things being equal, those things seem to have gone Wesleyan's way. And I just have this funny feeling that come about 3:00, Wesleyan is going to be singing the fight song at midfield on the Bantam.
Let me say this. I'm going to disagree with one thing you just said. You talk about this year, calls, bounces, things have gone the way of Wesleyan. I think, on the contrary, I think what makes it so amazing is that as someone who's broadcast half of their games and has watched most of their games, I think calls have gone their way from time to time. But I think what makes it so incredible is that in a lot of these games, some of the most ridiculous, incredible things that could possibly go against the team have happened to Wesleyan, and they're still figuring out ways to win the game. Listen, I don't always have the opportunity to talk about what I think is going to happen in a game, but in this game, I have statistical data, and that statistical data is that these two eyes have seen both of these teams in person, and I have called every one of the plays in those games. What I can't unsee, and now I said this to his face on this podcast in week 2 or 3, I can't unsee what I saw in the Wesleyan Trinity game last year, which was what makes Nico Candido special is that, and Coach Hammer said this on our preview, is that he gets outside of the pocket and he extends plays. And when he gets out of the pocket, he's a different player. However, against Trinity last year, they let him get outside of the pocket purposely, and they sat back in a 3-deep zone coverage, and they suckered him into throwing into zone coverages. And he threw 4 or 5 interceptions in that game. If Wesleyan is going to have a chance to win this football game, they're going to have to do an exponentially better job at the line of scrimmage of diagnosing what the defense is doing and taking advantage of that. And if that means running the football 40 times, they need to run the football 40 times. What Wesleyan cannot do is fall into fool's gold, into the trap of thinking we need to get our best player of the football, and we need to, because Trinity's going to take Chase Wilson out of this football game. They are.
Yeah.
And
Williams tried to do it too.
No,
they
that's
tried.
not even true. It's not even true, because the first No, because the first 4 drives of that game, Chase was in single coverage and he was wide open and he made a couple plays and he dropped a couple passes and they missed him a couple times. They did not try to take him out of the game. They let him get into a rhythm in the beginning of the game. He caught the first 2 passes of the game. At halftime, Nico Candido completed 6 passes. And here's a trivia question. All 6 catches were made by Chase Wilson. So they did not take him out of the game, Dave. He had 6 catches for 90-plus yards in the first half of that game, in spite of the drops and the missed opportunities. In the second half, they adjusted and they tried to bracket him, whatever. Trinity is too smart for that. They're going to try to get to Wesleyan with 3 or 4 guys. They're going to occasionally bring an outside linebacker, and they're going to try to confuse Nico. If Wesleyan has learned from what happened last year, the Cardinals have as good of a chance as any. They have the ability to make big plays. Nico Candido is a gamer. Their defense is bend but don't break. They're spectacular at the second 2 levels on defense. But it's going to come down. I'm telling you right now, it's so cliched. If this turnover battle is within 1 turnover, if it's 1 on either side, Wesleyan has a really good chance of winning this football game. If it's 2 or more, Trinity's going to win by 20 points. And we'll have to wait and see. But listen, I don't have rose-tinted glasses. I call it like I see it. You know me well enough to know that. I'm a realist. And listen, the hidden storyline on this one is I'm not calling a game on Saturday. So I will be in attendance as a pure spectator, which is something I have never done. It'll be my first NESCAC game as an adult, as a spectator. I typically broadcast. I turned down some opportunities to call playoff games in other sports because I wanted to be a part of this with respect to the podcast. So I'll be there. If you see me and you wear Vegas gold and blue, say hello. If you see me and you're a Cardinal fan, obviously say hello. We'd love to catch up with any and everybody who's there. I look forward to that. And what's exciting is that there's juice in week 9. So that's what we signed up for, right? Because this can easily be 8-0 versus 4-4.
The best part about this week coming up, win or lose, is there's not going to be a tie this year. So we've got
that's the best part. Because we got
a real champion, and hopefully the NESCAC takes something away about that. The second best thing is win or lose, we'll be eating turducken in the tailgate, Chris.
I'll be there for that.
Because it is the annual Turducken Bowl.
Nothing better than that. I can tell you with conviction, there will be a turkey, there will be a duck, and there will at least be part chicken. I can confirm.
Yes, there will be.
I can confirm that is a real thing. And listen, we'll be following all the games. We'll be tweeting. So we want your feedback. We want to know where you're going to be, where you're going to be watching. We want to hear back from you. We're also planning on, full disclosure, this is 9 Weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. We'll have at least one more episode. We're going to wrap up the season. We want to do some other things along the way, time permitting, but personally, this has been enjoyable. I've enjoyed talking about the NESCAC with you. And listen, we just have to sit back and see what happens here, Dave, because we aren't fans here of any particular team, but we are fans of good football and we are fans of drama. And all I hope for is a good football game and drama. So for that to happen, I'll be a happy guy.
Yeah, it's going to be a really great week. Can't wait till Saturday. And as Chris said, we are going to do some special tough stuff for our final. We're going to have a championship presentation and our offensive players here.
We're going to give awards.
Yeah. Yep.
There's some other things coming up, but you're going to have to stay tuned for that. But for now, this is an extra long, supersized episode, but this is a supersized week of football. So we feel like it's necessary. So hopefully wherever you're driving from to get to wherever you're going, you're enjoying this. And please reach out to us at ChrisGrace82, at 9 Weeks NESCAC, at Real NESCAC Man. Like, comment. We want to know what you want, what's different. We hope you've enjoyed this because, listen, this is a labor of love. We're taking time to do this. We're not doing it for money. We're doing it for fun. And we want to thank our wives because our wives give us a lot of flexibility and a lot
Absolutely.
And in particular, my wife, who deals with the 2-year-old, and Priscilla, who deals with all of your crap. We certainly want to thank them. But for now, I don't know, Dave, if you got any final thoughts before we sign off, let them rip.
Yeah, let's just hope it's not a 5 overtime game on Saturday because I have a rehearsal dinner to get to because Priscilla's son is getting married on Sunday. So we have a rehearsal dinner Saturday night. Yeah, of course. But I'm all in. Let's go.
I take back everything I just said. Last week on homecoming, and now this year on the last Saturday. Oh my goodness.
We got our priorities. We're all set, Chris, and Priscilla will be there as well.
What time is the rehearsal dinner?
It's 7:30. Well, we're
And
good.
where is it?
It's Arthur Ave. We'll be there. We'll be at Mario's at 7:30.
Good food.
The best.
All right, good. So you just got to get out of there by 3:30. You'll be good. 4 o'clock.
We're good. We're all set.
Taking it in stride. My man. Listen, for Coach BJ Hammer, for Julian Young, and of course, for the real NESCAC man, Dave Bagatelle, I'm Chris Grace. This is 9 weeks, your unofficial but official NESCAC Football Podcast. Stay tuned. We'll see you next week. Until then, so long, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.